The first time I saw the shock in my family's eyes, I realized they had never actually seen me at all. Madeline held my laptop above her head like a weapon, her laugh sharp, rehearsed, calculated to wound. "Everyone, look at this," she announced, her voice echoing through the dining room. I froze for a heartbeat, my chest tightening as the numbers on the screen glared back. $11 million. $11 million I had quietly earned while they thought I struggled alongside them. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. The air turned electric. My mother's mouth fell open, her jaw tightening until the polished skin of her face reddened. My father's face paled, veins rising at his temples. And Madeline, she wore that dramatic gasp of triumph, the same one she perfected for every social event, every performance in our lives, every attempt to make me feel small. But I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the obedient child who let them pull her into crises that were never hers to bear. "You let us struggle?" my mother hissed, every word dripping with theatrical rage. "All these years?" I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating, a trap for them to realize just how powerless their accusation sounded. Years of calculated manipulation, years of whispered guilt trips and staged emergencies, all unmasked by a single glowing screen. I saw their expressions flicker: disbelief, confusion, fury, and, just for a fraction of a second, fear. "You've been sending $2,000 a month for what we told you were medical emergencies," I said softly, my voice a sharp contrast to the chaos erupting around me. "That's $96,000 over 4 years. My money, my choice, not yours to manipulate." My father's face turned red, veins standing out like cords beneath the skin. "You knew about Madeline's treatments. You knew we needed help," he shouted. I did know. I had documented everything. Every call, every emergency, every tearful plea, preserved meticulously in spreadsheets, cloud drives, and dated notes. And the truth revealed itself with brutal clarity. The house had been paid off 7 years ago, the so-called financial crises were nothing but theater, and every luxury purchase my sister had made coincided perfectly with the monthly payments I had sent. Prada bags, Dubai resorts, spa retreats, all of it timed with my generosity, exploited by the very people who claimed to love me. Madeline's smirk faltered as her performance faltered. My mother's polished, perfect rage began to wobble under the weight of undeniable proof. And my father, always the enabler, couldn't find his footing. I could feel their panic, that sudden shift when a carefully constructed narrative collapses in real time. I glanced at my grandmother, Margaret, who had remained quiet, observing. Her eyes met mine, subtle but unwavering. Approval, recognition, strength. The only validation I had ever needed. Her slight nod was enough to steady me, enough to remind me that I didn't need to explain, justify, or shrink myself for the sake of anyone who had never truly seen me. "I've been doing everything they asked," I said aloud, my voice firmer now. "But I also see the truth." The weight of decades of manipulation lifted with each word. Every memory of being the responsible one, the obedient one, the invisible sibling who was sent away whenever my sister needed attention, surged through me. And with it, a long-buried anger flared, clear, precise, unstoppable. Madeline's phone continued recording, capturing the moment for her followers, for her social media empire built on curated performances and manufactured drama. She had always thrived in public attention, and I had been invisible behind her spotlight. But the tables had turned. The spotlight was now mine, and this time it illuminated the truth. "I've used you," I said, calm, almost clinical, "for years, for every vacation, every luxury purchase, every supposed emergency, and you thought I wouldn't see it. I did. Every step, every detail." Madeline's gasp was real this time, her calculated facade cracking. My mother's lips pressed together, the rigid mask of authority slipping. My father's eyes darted to the screen, then back to me, finally realizing that their narratives had no foundation in fact, only in manipulation and deceit. I reached for my bag and closed the laptop with a definitive click. "Dinner's paid for," I said, quietly, deliberately, letting the words settle like a stone in the room. Enjoy. I didn't wait for arguments, protests, or attempts to guilt me further. I walked away, the sound of my heels against the floor echoing with newfound authority. Every step was a reclamation, every inch of distance from that dining room a declaration. I would no longer be invisible, I would no longer be used, and I would no longer apologize for my success. As I reached the sliding glass door, a buzzing in my pocket drew my attention. Madeline's voicemail, her voice dripping with a mix of panic and calculated theatrics. I hesitated for the briefest fraction of a second, curiosity threatening to undo my composure. Then I silenced it. The next move wasn't mine to make. It was theirs, and I had all the time to watch them unravel. The autumn sun caught the edges of the glass, glinting across the patio where I had once spent hours hiding in plain sight, watching the family I loved and who had never truly loved me perform their carefully staged lives. I stepped into the crisp air, the tension of years dissolving around me, replaced by something I hadn't felt since childhood. Control. Real, unshakable control. For the first time, I understood the power of being unseen until it was time to be seen. The invisible child had grown into a woman they could neither manipulate nor ignore, and the story was only beginning. The next morning, the city felt different. Chicago sprawled below me, glinting like a grid of opportunity, and I could feel every inch of control I'd claimed yesterday stretching through my chest. I didn't answer the calls. Helen, Thomas, and even Madeline, every desperate attempt to contact me went straight to voicemail. Let them stew. I had work to do, and this wasn't just about them anymore. It was about preserving my life, my reputation, everything I'd built from the ground up. I began compiling evidence, organizing it meticulously in a secure folder labeled Family Financial History. Every transfer, every marked medical or mortgage support, every voicemail from my mother, all dated, all time-stamped, all undeniable. I pulled up Madeline's Instagram posts, cross-referencing every vacation, every designer handbag, every spa retreat, with the date my money hit her account. Patterns emerged, sinister and undeniable, and I felt the faint, satisfying validation. For the first time, I had proof not only of their manipulation, but of the audacity with which they had executed it. Hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets, legal correspondence, and secure calls. My assistant, Maria, handled the usual client operations, while I orchestrated something far more personal, the dismantling of the illusion my family had built. Each carefully curated lie they had spun was about to be exposed, and I would do it without a single word wasted. Efficiency, precision, and control, my silent weapons. By midday, the first cracks began to appear. Security called to report that Helen had shown up at the office, her face flushed with indignation and her hands shaking, trying to push past the receptionist. I didn't even flinch. Escort her out. Trespassing. Call the police if she refuses, I instructed. Maria confirmed quietly, and the events unfolded exactly as planned. Helen, Thomas, and Madeline, each acting according to years of learned tactics, were powerless in the face of my calm authority. As they were removed, I allowed myself a small, private smile. For years, I had been taught to react, to appease, to make peace. Now, I watched them unravel from a distance, and it was intoxicating. Madeline's camera still rolled, her performance intended to humiliate me, but instead it captured only the reality of her desperation. I could almost hear her gears in her mind grinding. This wasn't supposed to happen. Eden was supposed to crumble. I spent the afternoon finalizing documentation for my legal counsel, sending each piece with precise instructions. Exhibit A, every payment I had made. Exhibit B, her social media evidence. Exhibit C, the county records proving the house had been paid off 7 years ago. The so-called financial crises were nothing but theater, and every luxury purchase my sister had made coincided perfectly with the monthly payments I had sent. Prada bags, Dubai resorts, spa retreats, all of it timed with my generosity, exploited by the very people who claimed to love me. Madeline's smirk faltered as her performance faltered. My mother's polished, perfect rage began to wobble under the weight of undeniable proof. And my father, always the enabler, couldn't find his footing. I could feel their panic, that sudden shift when a carefully constructed narrative collapses in real time. I glanced at my grandmother, Margaret, who had remained quiet, observing. Her eyes met mine, subtle but unwavering. Approval, recognition, strength. The only validation I had ever needed. Her slight nod was enough to steady me, enough to remind me that I didn't need to explain, justify, or shrink myself for the sake of anyone who had never truly seen me. "I've been doing everything they asked," I said aloud, my voice firmer now. "But I also see the truth." The weight of decades of manipulation lifted with each word. Every memory of being the responsible one, the obedient one, the invisible sibling who was sent away whenever my sister needed attention, surged through me. And with it, a long-buried anger flared, clear, precise, unstoppable. Madeline's phone continued recording. "Jonathan," I said, steady and deliberate, "my family's actions will not interfere with our work. We are prepared and everything will proceed as planned." I could hear the hesitation in his sigh, the weight of concern, but I also felt the satisfaction of regaining my narrative. They could try to disrupt me, but they couldn't penetrate the systems I had built, the fortress of my life that no one had constructed for them. Even as I spoke to Jonathan, Maria updated me on the lobby situation. Thomas had arrived, demanding to see me, shouting about filial duty, his voice echoing through the building. Security kept him at bay, professional and unyielding. My pulse remains calm, my breathing even. I realized with an almost chilling clarity that they had been using fear for decades, and fear no longer worked. Authority, preparation, and proof were my shields now. Later, I compiled a counter-strategy with my legal team and PR director. We drafted a cease and desist letter to address the trespassing, complete with detailed evidence ready for submission should any frivolous claim arise. Madeline's social media had already started to backfire. The more she tried to manipulate public perception, the more her posts were scrutinized against the evidence we had. Within hours, the first fractures appeared. Sponsors began questioning her credibility, local associates distanced themselves, and the narrative she had carefully crafted for years began to crumble. That evening, Margaret and I sat in the penthouse, the Chicago skyline glittering below us like a map of every choice and opportunity I had seized. "They underestimated you," she said softly, sipping her tea, "and that was their greatest mistake." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, precise and unassailable, and for the first time, I felt a deeper satisfaction than I ever had chasing approval from a family who had never truly valued me. I had built my life, my empire, my independence, and now the only person whose opinion mattered was standing beside me, quiet and strong, a witness to every step I had taken. The next morning, reports started coming in. Madeline's remaining sponsors were dropping her, citing concerns about integrity. Thomas's business associates began quietly distancing themselves. Helen's community standing was eroding, every social circle she relied on now hesitant, cautious, unable to reconcile the evidence of her manipulations. The walls they had built around themselves with deceit and performance were crumbling under the weight of facts, meticulously documented and undeniable. I stayed focused on my work, maintaining client communications and preparing for the London demonstration. Every call, every email, every step was deliberate. While my family's world unraveled, my own expanded, my company thrived, and I remained unshaken. The contrasts could not have been starker. Their panic, desperation, and public exposure against my calm, measured authority built on years of preparation and silent success. And yet, even as the pieces fell into place, a small tremor of unease lingered. The cease and desist letter had been delivered, the evidence compiled, the legal path clear, but the human element remained unpredictable. They were desperate, and desperation can breed recklessness. I felt it in the tension of the air, in the quiet pause before my phone buzzed again, signaling another attempt at manipulation. A chill ran down my spine as I read the text from Madeline. "We need to talk." The simplicity of the message belied the storm behind it. I didn't respond. I knew the time for dialogue would come, but on my terms, on my schedule, and with every advantage firmly in my control. For the first time, I felt what it truly meant to be untouchable, not through wealth alone, but through preparation, strategy, and clarity. The invisible child they had once overlooked had become a force they could not manipulate, control, or even predict. And as I leaned back in my chair, the city stretching endlessly before me, I realized that the next move in this high-stakes game wouldn't come from me, but from them. And I was ready. The morning sunlight spilled across my penthouse as I sipped coffee, the city below gleaming like a puzzle I had finally solved. Madeline's text still sat unread on my phone. I didn't flinch. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, and every ounce of control I cultivated over the last few days told me the same: respond only when it serves me. The legal team had already prepped a detailed response for any potential defamation or emotional distress claims. Every transfer, every screenshot, every social post, chronologically documented and cross-referenced, was ready to counteract their manipulations. I knew their next move would be desperate, emotional, loud, and I would meet it with precision. By mid-morning, the first public signals began to appear. Madeline had posted another video, trying to spin herself as the victim, her voice trembling in carefully timed intervals, tears strategically brimming. I let it play silently on my tablet, muted, comparing the dates and captions against the record of my financial support. Each extravagant purchase, each luxury getaway, perfectly aligns with the money I had sent. Proof undeniable. My pulse remained steady, my satisfaction simmered quietly beneath the surface. Within hours, the first consequences emerged. Sponsors began contacting my office, asking about the timeline of events and the authenticity of Madeline's claims. My PR director, Sophia, expertly guided every conversation, presenting only facts, letting evidence speak louder than words. 2 sponsors immediately terminated contracts with Madeline, citing breaches of authenticity and ethical concerns. The cascade had begun. By afternoon, Helen's attempts to intervene on social media were collapsing. Friends and associates previously aligned with her distanced themselves as screenshots of financial records, bank statements, and social posts leaked to local news outlets. Thomas, once confident in his leverage as the patriarch, faced growing scrutiny from his professional and social circles. Every lie they had constructed for years unraveled under the weight of irrefutable facts. I stayed focused on my work, maintaining client communications and preparing for the London demonstration. Every call, every email, every step was deliberate. While my family's world unraveled, my own expanded, my company thrived, and I remained unshaken. The contrasts could not have been starker. Their panic, desperation, and public exposure against my calm, measured authority built on years of preparation and silent success. And yet, even as the pieces fell into place, a small tremor of unease lingered. The cease and desist letter had been delivered, the evidence compiled, the legal path clear, but the human element remains unpredictable. They were desperate, and desperation can breed recklessness. I felt it in the tension of the air and the quiet pause before my phone buzzed again, signaling another attempt at manipulation. A chill ran down my spine as I read the text from Madeline. "We need to talk." The simplicity of the message belied the storm behind it. I didn't respond. I knew the time for dialogue would come, but on my terms, on my schedule, and with every advantage firmly in my control. For the first time, I felt what it truly meant to be untouchable, not through wealth alone, but through preparation, strategy, and clarity. The invisible child they had once overlooked had become a force they could not manipulate, control, or even predict. And as I leaned back in my chair, the city stretching endlessly before me, I realized that the next move in this high-stakes game wouldn't come from me, but from them. And I was ready. As the scholarship announcement went live, I observed the media pivot. Headlines shifted from family scandal to philanthropy, from manipulation to empowerment. Articles celebrated the initiative, praising foresight, precision, and integrity. I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with reclaiming my narrative and my agency. Evenings were quieter now. Margaret joined me for dinner, her presence a constant reminder of stability and perspective. The family that had once dominated my thoughts now occupied only a small, inconsequential space. Their calls went unanswered, their texts remained unopened. I had chosen boundaries over guilt, evidence over emotion, and myself over obligation. Weeks later, the final fallout was complete. Madeline's social media following plummeted as her curated image collapsed. Thomas's community influence evaporated. Helen's connections dissolved under scrutiny. The very people who had tried to dictate my life found themselves isolated, powerless, and exposed. And I continued building my company, preparing for the London and Tokyo office launches, and mentoring young entrepreneurs. A subtle tension remained, though, a final reckoning that wasn't public but deeply personal. One evening, a man arrived at my office without notice, a representative from a major international client, curious about the family scandal. The board members expressed hesitation, wary that lingering drama might affect their reputation. I led him through my verification systems personally, demonstrating both precision and reliability, the same qualities that had shielded me through the past weeks. By the end of the day, the contract was fully secured, worth millions, and untouched by the chaos surrounding my family. On a quiet morning, 6 months after the Thanksgiving confrontation, I opened my journal, a leather-bound gift from a mentee, and wrote the final entry of that chapter. The invisible child has learned to shine. I no longer apologize for the light. I no longer carry the burdens of those who would manipulate me. I am seen, I am heard, I am free. Margaret, standing in the doorway, smiled knowingly. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. Together, we stepped into the future, a future I had earned, a future I controlled, and for the first time, it felt limitless. The story of betrayal, manipulation, and hidden wealth had ended, but the story of empowerment, independence, and justice had just begun. The family that once dictated my world could no longer touch it. My wealth, my influence, and my integrity were mine, untouchable and unapologetic. I spent the following weeks building more than just business expansion. I began mentoring young women, especially those who had been overshadowed or underestimated by their families, teaching them the power of quiet persistence, careful documentation, and self-worth. I wanted their victories to be as visible as my own, their growth a mirror of what had taken me years to achieve. Late one evening, I stood by the window of my penthouse, Chicago glittering below. For the first time, there was no fear of familial retaliation, no lingering guilt, no whisper of obligation. The city hummed with opportunity, and I felt its pulse align with mine. I was the architect of my life, a life that once belonged to manipulation, but now thrived in authenticity. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, the family that had once sought to control me had no access to my world. Helen called repeatedly, her desperation evident. Thomas sent emails full of indignation. Madeline posted videos pleading for understanding, but none reached me. I had created a fortress of evidence, authority, and support, and the gates were firmly closed. That night, Margaret and I shared a quiet dinner in the penthouse, reflecting on the transformation. The woman who had nurtured and seen me in childhood now witnessed me fully grown, independent, and unshakable. She sipped her tea, eyes soft yet proud. "You have not only survived, you have redefined the rules, and they will never forget it." I smiled. The weight of years, the years of invisible labor, of silent success, had finally manifested, not as wealth alone, but as clarity, justice, and freedom. I no longer measured my worth in their eyes. I measured it in the lives I could impact, the systems I had built, and the unwavering truth I carried. The unopened letter from Helen remained in my desk, a symbol of choice rather than fear. I would never need it. The past was behind me, the future was mine. And as I looked out over the Chicago skyline, every flicker of light mirrored my own certainty. I had claimed my life, fully, unapologetically, and without compromise.